folks are still rolling in, but it's 9:02, so we'll be prompt and respectful of everyone's time. So I appreciate everybody hopping on this morning. Super excited for the webinar and presentation today of what we hope is kind of just the start of this process and this partnership with CORI and Nathan and Rizzy and their whole group there. So I'm Colby Hall. I'm the Executive Director of SOAR, Shaping Our Appalachian Region, and I'm joined by my Chief Operating Officer, Josh Ball, and then Nathan Willingham, who is Head of Federal Grant Strategy at CORI and Rizzy. And so we're super excited to have you with us today. I just wanted to kick off with just saying a few quick things and kind of what we're hoping to accomplish today before I hand it off to Nathan and let him take control of the vehicle. Grants are really hard. I think everybody agrees with that. There's huge barriers to entry. They're time consuming, they're competitive, and nothing is guaranteed. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that sometimes when there's grant money that's been announced, that it just rains money, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So I guess all that to say, there are huge opportunity costs with grants, and there's a strategy behind it, and there's a process that every organization and every individual that's looking at applying for a grant should consider. And then if they decide to move forward, it's working with the right partners to make sure that they give themselves the best chance possible to be successful. So SOAR is fortunate to have a relationship with CORI and Rizzy, a group that we have great respect for, a group that's been very successful in the past securing grant funding. And so what we're hoping to do today is, by working with them, provide organizations across Eastern Kentucky, organizations that are interested in applying for some specific grant programs that Nathan will mention, some very targeted and specific technical assistance for a full proposal development. And our hope is that we can encourage first-time grant applications, or we can encourage folks that maybe have received grants before to be successful applying and winning grants from other state and federal agencies. So that's really kind of the point of today, is to encourage the attendees on and the participants on to submit a concept proposal for a grant idea that you have, and then let us work with CORI and Rizzy to refine it and potentially offer a full suite of services for the further development of your idea. And so again, this is just the start of the conversation, but we're looking forward to a great call and some great information to be shared by Nathan this morning. So Josh, you have anything to add before I kick it over to Nathan?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank everyone for registering. I think this is another exciting program for communities to put ideas together, but put them into action. So
yeah, and Josh, I would assume throughout the conversation, it will have folks, just if they have Q&A, to put it in the Q&A, and then we can respond to those at specific times.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And that's at the bottom of the screen there for the folks. So Nathan, I hand it over to you.
Hey, I appreciate it, Colby. Thank you, Josh, for setting everything up. I am just thrilled to be here. I have had the chance to get to know Colby and Josh over the last several months as we've been able to escape the confines of the pandemic and venture out in the world once again and meet people face to face more than just virtually. And it's been a real privilege to learn about SOAR and Eastern Kentucky. Of course, my name is Nathan Willingham, and I'm sitting right now in Northwest Alabama, in the southwestern most part of the Appalachian Regional Commission's service area. It's a little flatter than Eastern Kentucky from what I hear. But I do have a background in rural development and rural economic development, and I am also a resident of the ARC region, and consider myself also a rural resident. So it's incredibly special in a lot of ways to be able to do this work, working with agencies like SOAR, and to be able to reach across the internet and the video airwaves, if you will, and to have an audience that represents Eastern Kentucky and that very special place in rural America with us today. So thank y'all for your time. And like Colby said, excellent introduction. Grants can be hard. They're set up for accountability. They're not set up for ease of access or use. They're set up in order to kind of keep the public dollars that are being expended for specific purposes as accountable as possible. And so they're competitive, and they're compliant and all those scary things that go along with them. But and my job is to, best job in the world, my job is to work with rural communities and rural community leaders and to help them understand what their project ideas are and to help direct those project ideas toward, specifically now, toward entrepreneurship and digital technology-based economic development with the Center on Rural Innovation. So, of course, I mentioned before, my name is Nathan Willingham. I'm federal grants lead here at Center on Rural Innovation, CORI. And about 2 decades of experience now working in community and economic development, workforce development, public transportation, entrepreneurship, sort of a grab bag of different developmental activities brought me to this point working with CORI on digital tech projects. Started out in the state planning office in the state of Tennessee for a few years, and then spent a dozen years as the planning director of a local development district in the Northwest Alabama Council of Local Governments. Quite a handful or a mouthful as far as a organization's title is concerned. But NACOG worked with rural communities in 5 counties and 37 municipalities on economic and community development projects, and spent some time at the Center on Rural Innovation as director of sponsored programs before coming over here to as the University of North Alabama as director of sponsored programs before jumping over here to Center on Rural Innovation, working on grant programs. I am a certified planner, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, so I understand planning, zoning, subdivision, land development, how all that's connected to community comprehensive plans and development. At this point, I have been lucky enough to work in just over 100 communities in rural places, mostly rural places across the country. Gotten to know a lot of people and seen a lot of projects work. A lot of projects didn't work. A lot of people that are working hard on projects that didn't work to make them work, because that's what it takes to be successful. 20 plus states, and last count is a little behind, about $67 million in grant writing and administration that has been successful. So a little bit of experience over a few years in what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to tell you right now, the expert in your project is always going to be you. The expert in your community is always going to be you. And the job of anybody who is working with a community is to respect that community, respect the capabilities, the autonomy and decision-making that is in place, and just the power and purpose that drives this work at the local level is something that is always amazing to me. As an organization, CORI has been responsible for, Center on Rural Innovation has been responsible for about $18.5 million of funding for digital technology-based ecosystem development. And we're going to talk about some of those programs here today as part of our agenda that have been used successfully by rural communities. They're big programs and they're small ones. Everybody wants the huge project that is going to bring in, a couple of $1 million, and that's wonderful. But to get there are a lot of ways to look at smaller incremental investments, smaller grants that get you the experience and proven track record to be able to apply successfully and competitively to larger opportunities. So our agenda today, I'm going to talk a bit about Center on Rural Innovation, and especially, touch briefly on what Colby had mentioned, which is the partnership that we have with SOAR for grant support. I do want to introduce CORI's digital ecosystem model because it really frames the conversation around grants that we are interested in having with communities. It focuses services and grants and development activities on digital tech because of the economic benefits of it. And it's very mission focused. And so I want to present that model because it helps to establish a framework for the work that we do with rural communities. And then we'll get into the heart of it. My objective when talking about grants for broadband and grants for digital economic development is just for nobody to fall asleep, hit the keyboard with their head, and just like send a string of letters across chat, right? Somebody said that to present effectively, you've got to be your authentic self. And my authentic self is, I'm not necessarily the best presenter in the world. I don't like putting presentations together. I would rather sit and chat over coffee with people. So my goal when talking about this really dense and dry material is not to read the slides about every rule and regulation, because we're going to give you the slides and the information is out there on the internet. My goal is to give you an introduction to these opportunities in a way that hopefully leads to further thought about how they might apply in your community, and then advances this partnership that we have with SOAR. Because the goal at the end of the day is to better understand what's out there, what the opportunities are, and how you might connect to these grant opportunities. So that's our overall purpose. Then we'll talk about the next steps in the partnership, and should have some time at the end for any questions that you might have. So I'm going to talk a bit about The Center on Rural Innovation. So CORI was established in 2017 because what some people, we recognized, our organization's leadership recognized what some folks have called the hollowing of America. The trends in rural America where population decline and economic prosperities decline, and the decline in overall economic and job opportunity has been particularly hard hitting in rural communities for a variety of factors. So to address this crisis, this ongoing crisis in rural America, caused by a lot of different things, caused by both national and international scale dilemmas, as well as local problems and local issues, concentrations of local problems, but connected to global and international trends. To address those things, the Center on Rural Innovation was established to look at how digital technology could support job growth and job creation. And the mission statements, like every mission statement, it's really a lot of dense words on the page. What it boils down to is we're an organization that works with rural communities across the country to try to figure out strategies that can be effective for improving economic opportunity by taking advantage of digital technology jobs. We do that by supporting scalable entrepreneurship. We do that by fostering and encouraging new technology that creates new value in communities that can be imported to those communities using internet, broadband, and the foundational infrastructure that supports digital technology. Because we're at a time now in rural America where I think we're seeing that there's more opportunity than we have realized in the past, and we'll talk a bit about more of that. But in the early days of our organization, 2017, we're established with this mission because what had been observed working with rural communities by our founders was that, especially after the 2008-2009 economic crisis, there was a crash that happened, and it was deeper and harsher in rural communities than it was elsewhere, and the recovery was not as effective. So if you look at the two lines on the page here, they track the trends in urban job growth and rural job growth between 2008 and about 2021, so last year. And you can see that crashes have happened twice, and recoveries have begun twice, but that the rural recovery has never reestablished the position and the number of jobs that were available in the rural communities that were available before the crash and then after. Steep decline, some recovery, but never reestablishing at the same level. Even though the recovery that we're in right now from the pandemic has not yet fully reinvested jobs in rural communities. So that's a huge problem. And that's a source of this hollowing, of this ongoing and persistent economic crisis. It's a massive opportunity gap. And so examining how this happened, we've come up with 3 national and international trends that everyone probably is aware of. You've heard this a million times, I'm sure, but we trace it back to automation, globalization, and in particular for us, and importantly, a decline in entrepreneurship for the 30 years prior to the 2008 economic crisis. So automation is just how technology has naturally advanced to automate tasks that workers perform. As tasks are automated, fewer workers are needed. As fewer workers are needed, it becomes easier to invest in capital rather than people, and to get as much productive value out of the same span of time from machines as from people. Technology replaces people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because technology replacing people does create lots of wealth and lots of value. But it's a bad thing if you're a community that's being impacted by that. You combine that with the effects of globalization and open borders and free trade, where labor-intensive activities can be offshored more easily because we've lowered restrictions and barriers, with benefits to lowering those barriers, but the costs of them are also present. Now, the policymakers say that in the aggregate, and I'm not going to argue with the policymakers, they say that in the aggregate across the country, free trade is a great thing. And maybe overall it does produce more buying power and more productive capability and so forth. But when you zero in on a rural community that's having jobs offshored, the effects of globalization and of automation disproportionately landed in rural locations, smaller areas that were less able to take the hits than other locations. Where I am in Northwest Alabama, adjacent to Northeast Mississippi. For us, it was textiles and furniture manufacturing. And the effects of automation and then globalization together just hollowed out both of those industries. They are completely gone from our economy since the 90s. And then here recently, it's been food processing and manufacturing that's been affected by it. So another industry that's had significant decline as a result of these trends that are just continuing to accelerate over time. Now you combine that with an overall decline in the number of new businesses starting up and the entrepreneurial mindset of rural communities. And what you have is a less resilient rural economy, and a rural economy that, because of its size, still scrappy, but less capable of overcoming the loss of these major job centers and clusters of activities in their economy. And what you wind up with is a rural America that's been left behind, especially when it comes to technology. So when you look at the tech sector, the innovation economy grew about 3.5 times the rate of the overall economy in the 15 years from 2005 to 2019. So it was a huge creator of wealth in America, but those jobs tended to cluster almost exclusively in rural location. I mean, in urban locations. So that gap, that opportunity gap for technology jobs has widened, and as the one of the fastest growing areas of new value creation, which is tied to jobs and prosperity and economic opportunity. To participate in a market, you have to create value. The amount of that value is distributed in your local economy. That's microeconomics, right? The capture of that value has occurred in locations that are not, well, mostly in locations that are not rural. But the potential for that value is increasingly becoming a reality. It's becoming realized by local leadership and people in rural locations that it doesn't have to be that way. That tech talent can be found anywhere in the United States. And the pandemic especially has been a tragic watershed for us in this industry. Tragic, of course, because of the deep and devastating loss of life and the disruption of our local economy and the loss of productivity and the fear and anxiety that's come with the separation from one another and the lack of economic opportunity, the decline that is a result of that. That's a tragedy. But for many people, it's also a sign of opportunity, because remote work and digitally enabled jobs and digital tech invested jobs are much more present in the minds of our workers and our population today than they were 2 years ago. And I'll use myself as an example. 2 years ago, I was working in higher education in an office on a university campus in Florence, Alabama. And in March, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And like everyone in the education industry, K-12, higher ed, community college, and the rest of the world, we had to adjust to remote work. We were fortunate. Education was hard hit, don't get me wrong, but we were fortunate because we could adjust to remote work. Many industries couldn't. Many industries were essential workers that had to be exposed and higher rates of infection, were sick for longer, are sick still today, and have not recovered as quickly. But for those that were in education, we went to the house and worked for several months before coming back on campus. And before my time at the University of North Alabama, I had been a regional planning director working with local communities and economic development. And I had taken this new position to set up a new office on that university campus. And I loved it. I loved working with professors, but it just wasn't the same for me professionally as a planner, as a public administrator, as a rural economic developer. It wasn't the same for me professionally. And I wasn't exactly dissatisfied, but I did want to get back into working with rural communities, but I didn't see an opportunity until the pandemic. Pandemic struck, and it was proof of concept for me that I could do this work reaching people in Eastern Kentucky from Northwest Alabama. And so when the position with CORI came along, it was the confidence of the remote work model that had been paid dearly for by the evidence that we witnessed in the pandemic that gave me the confidence to become a tech-enabled worker and to get back into doing something that I love, which is, again, best job in the world, working with rural communities on economic development and to help realize their hopes and dreams of prosperity. And so what we're seeing is that more and more communities are becoming tech-enabled hubs to be able to take advantage of their talent, to be able to retain the talent that they have. And that includes rural communities through remote work, through tech-based economic development. It's a fascinating opportunity in rural America to start to mend some of the deep wounds that have been caused by technology, automation, globalization, lack of entrepreneurship, by investing in high-value technology-enabled technology jobs and startups as a means of bringing product market value back to rural America and importing the dollars that come with that while supporting local economies. And this isn't just a pie in the sky pipe dream for some futurist, in Silicon Valley somewhere. These are high-paying jobs. These are good jobs for people that can enter these markets. And so these are the average salaries for a number of the digital jobs that we're talking about. And those vary based on regional dynamics, but in general, they're good paying jobs. And they anchor families and communities are anchored by households and by families, however you define, right? I know the world, today is different than it was years ago, but community is still defined by the households and the families that can live and prosper in it. And the more of them that can live and prosper in your community, the more prosperous your community is, the safer it will be, the more we'll have the resources that it needs to do the work. And so that's why we're engaged in the work that we do. And so over the last several years, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've developed a digital ecosystem model. This is what we call a theory in action. It is a growing and evolving approach to working with communities to understand how digital ecosystems work. It's based a little bit on research, based a lot on experience, and it's based on sort of an emergent philosophy of working with communities, learning as much as we can, and adapting to the challenges that exist locally, and then understanding how those are connected to regional and national dynamics. But fundamentally, it's an ecosystem approach. An ecosystem approach is, it's a new term to kind of talk about community development, newish term to kind of talk about community development, investing in a cluster, investing in connected networks of institutions and individuals that are working together for a common cause, in this case for digital tech-based economic development. But it's also a recognition that digital tech is not the only form of economic development. It's just the one that our organization is invested in. It's not the best form of economic development. The best form of economic development is the form of economic development that causes your people to prosper, right? It's one element of a connected and comprehensive approach to economic development that a lot of communities think is not possible for them. So part of our work is to explain this, talk about it, engage with communities, and build confidence that it's possible, and build awareness of all of the different dots that need to be connected for an effective approach to ecosystem development based on a digital, investing in the power of digital tech to promote economic development alongside other things. And so our model embraces what we call the foundational elements, which are the aspects of community development that anybody who's worked in a regional planning commission or a city planning office or public works, or been connected to local or state government, you got to keep the roads surfaced, the electricity on, the water and the sewer moving in and out in the appropriate directions. And those are all complicated foundational infrastructure challenges. You don't want to get the directions mixed up on water and sewer. It's bad for your house and your neighborhood. But those type of foundational investments are necessary for all economic development. And they're hard challenges to tackle. And they take up a tremendous amount of time and capacity for local leadership and the institutions that are invested in local communities. And they include housing, public health and safety, leadership development and support, education, culture, entertainment, all the things you see here listed in the broadest, what we think of, if it's on its side, if it was upright, it'd be the base of the pyramid. Our organization recognizes the importance of those, and I think all of us have some experience in working in that area. Our mission really starts with communities that are working to maintain and build those foundational elements in it, but they are working to expand their capacity to maintain and build those foundational elements by investing in these other sections of our model, by investing in the necessary infrastructure for tech-enabled economic development, for digital ecosystems to thrive, and by investing in what we call the 5 direct drivers of digital technology-based economic development to create quality digital jobs and local wealth, primarily through startups, through new small business ventures that are entrepreneurs that are investing in technology that is new, disruptive, innovative, call it what you will. It's got a high value in the marketplace. And so it's got an opportunity to capture an extreme payoff, high value in the local marketplace, and to go on as a contributor to future tech-based or digital economic development. And so when we talk about this, it's sometimes helpful for us to sort of root it in the visual mind space of the downtown. Right? If you think about your traditional downtown development, maybe you've got a 2 or 3 story building, and there's a lot of things that happen in and around that hub of economic development. When you have the education sector, the broadband, and the capital investment, you could have digital technology, the green sphere, right there on the second floor, kind of hanging out there as one aspect of your economic development strategy for this hub, for this area, for this ecosystem. You still have to have housing. You still have to have lofts and living space. You have to have the foundational infrastructure, the place for people to gather and to work, which are your incubators, accelerators, and co-working space. Now, that's the middle floor. There is the area that our organization focuses on primarily for tech-based economic development, along with the foundational parts down at the bottom, the higher ed, the broadband, and the capital. But you still need the rest of your ecosystem to be healthy. And the taco truck is an interesting thing, and we use it as an illustration. The taco truck itself is not what we consider digital tech-based economic development. It is small business development. It is entrepreneurship, no question about that. Lifestyle business, Main Street business, whatever you call it, it's important to your local economy. But it's not the high value targets of a digital tech startup, which are the tech-enabled industries, the tech-driven industries. So, for example, the taco truck, if it was one of 50 taco trucks that was routed by a mobile application, that would be closer to the type of development that we are interested in. If that mobile application could be developed and then sold broadly at scale, at a large scale across the US, across the world, then that would be a scalable digital tech investment. And so finding solutions to common business problems that use technology that can be marketed at a broad scale, those are the kind of solutions that ultimately we're looking for. But it takes a lot to get there. All right, so it takes infrastructure, it takes investment in broadband, it takes local leadership capacity, and it takes the physical space for people to gather in your community, co-working space, co-location, entrepreneurship space. Broadband, of course, is universal technology for everything that we do nowadays, for this type of engagement, for education, for digital, for developing applications on the web, for moving code across the country. It's definitely, it's the waterways of the past and the roads of the past 50 years, or the equivalent of that in terms of what it means to economic development, all economic development, but especially to tech-based economic development. And of course, leadership capacity is essential. Leaders have to understand what we're talking about and have to be invested in the outcomes and have to believe in the outcomes. And that takes a narrative shift in a lot of communities. A lot of workplaces say, we can't do this. It's impossible. It's too big for us. We're too small for that, right? There's not a good fit. But I think part of our job is to convey the optimism of the moment in a way that people realize that even at the smaller scale of a rural community, tech-based economic development is an investment that's worth making because the opportunity to improve people's lives is there at all scales, large and small. And then finally, something that has been observed time and again is that these smaller entrepreneurship, they need a place that is supporting their activities. It's a physical space, a hub of activity where they can find business support services, like-minded people, exchange ideas, have these useful or fruitful collisions where new ideas and new innovation surfaces. And so connecting people together in a physical space where there's co-working and entrepreneurship taking place along with support services for businesses is an important investment in the infrastructure of economic development. Once those things are in place, or as they're being built out, there are 5 drivers of tech-based digital economy ecosystem, tech-based economic development. We mentioned the entrepreneurship support and incubation. These are the activity. We mentioned the physical space a second ago as infrastructure, but inside that physical space, one of the drivers is the level of support that the community provides for ecosystem building, for exchanging ideas, for storytelling, for changing a narrative, but also using all of that to engage with better understand the needs of entrepreneurs and to provide them direct support for their activity, business planning, business development, connections to all the rest of these drivers, and in general, orienting toward providing support services that build a network of connected individuals who understand economic development from this perspective and are working to invest themselves, their capital, and their community into this as part of their overall economic development strategy. But we all know nothing happens without access to capital. It's a huge challenge in rural communities, especially a big challenge in Appalachia. There is an increasing amount of venture capital flowing toward rural communities. We think that's a great sign, but it's still just a small fraction of the overall percentage of capital that's being invested in new startups. And so finding those capitals and filling the gaps in rural communities is a critical driver. And that's one of the things that an organized leadership model can tackle. Once those things are in place, making sure that the jobs that are created are accessible to rural residents is truly important, whether it's through a co-working space, maintaining internet connections, maintaining awareness, or providing job training, workforce development. The access to digital jobs piece and the digital workforce development support piece are so closely interwoven that they're almost the same driver. But when there's a job creator, that person needs employees that are trained, that are knowledgeable about the opportunities, that are willing to stay and work in an area, and they need to be able to access people to do the work of the jobs that they're creating. And then finally, we talk a lot about inclusivity in tech-based culture building. Inclusivity means different things to different communities. In every single community across the country, there are people who have been in and people who have been out. And that's going to look differently depending on where you are. At a national scale, we can kind of pass through the demographics and see and listen to the national scale conversation. And that does definitely inform the local conversations that we have. But inclusivity is a local concern. And the reason it's so important is first a question of fairness, equity, and morality, just basic, national civic pride in making sure that opportunity is distributed. Second is that we simply don't have enough people in this country who fit the mold or pattern of what we think of as a stereotypical tech worker to meet the demand for tech jobs. And so to meet that demand in a practical sense, we have to focus on inclusivity and building an inclusive tech culture. And that might look like outreach to underrepresented minority communities, Hispanic communities, and ESL communities in one community, in one location. In another location, it might look like outreach to poor generational, poor families that have been affected by generational poverty. People are disaffected as a result of globalization or changes in energy policy or substance abuse. So inclusivity needs to be a ground up, bottom up approach to understanding who is in your historical economic development pattern and who is out, and making an effort to include those that have been left out. And so, got a quick pause from hearing me kind of rattle on for a second to show you a video that we put together that's part of our attempt to transition or shift the narrative here. This is the future of rural. It's about 2.5 minutes long.
Dear America,
Hey, Nathan, there's no audios coming through. I don't know if there's anything you can do to change that.
Sorry, I'll have to go into my screen share. I clicked the wrong button. Technical difficulties. Josh should scold me. We talked about this earlier.
Dear America, you already know about our farms, our picturesque downtowns, our rugged mountains, and mighty rivers. We're proud of them, too. And chances are, you've heard about the tough times we've had. It's true, automation and globalization haven't been kind to us. The digital economy threatens to leave us behind, and with it, the tech jobs that should be able to happen anywhere, including here in rural America. Because you see, we are so much more than our sprawling landscapes. We are innovators, instigators, entrepreneurs, resilient, resourceful, capable of building new economic opportunities and solving problems for global markets. And we're ready to prove how 21st century technology will help our small towns and our nation as a whole thrive like never before. It will take a collective effort, but together we can shift the rural narrative. We can move beyond what could be and start focusing on what is. Rural startups, remote workers, accelerators, co-working spaces, incubators, tech employment, good paying innovation jobs tapping into our renowned grit and ingenuity. That's why we at the Center on Rural Innovation believe that innovation can happen anywhere. Working across the country with rural leaders, we know that you don't need a big population to support entrepreneurs. All it takes is a strong internet connection and communities like ours in the Rural Innovation Network, coming together to show the world what is possible when you invest in rural talent. It's our time to collaborate so that the whole of rural America can become greater than the sum of its parts, to become a force for innovation that investors and markets can no longer ignore. Because with creativity and relentless optimism, we can forge a bright and prosperous future. Sincerely, your rural neighbors.
And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw that video, I got goosebumps, the shivers, because I think it's a pretty inspiring vision of what it can, what those of us who are instigators and innovators can do together and accomplish. And I still get goosebumps when I see it, and that's why I'm so excited about the work that I'm able to do with organizations like
Dear America, you all
like SOAR, in partnerships like this. So I'm going to jump ahead. Colby mentioned earlier that the purpose of this partnership with CORI, Center on Rural Innovation and SOAR, is to increase the number and diversity and competitiveness of the grant proposals that are coming out of Eastern Kentucky, and in particular, interested in the engaging the opportunities of Eastern Kentucky with the opportunity that we just described in digital ecosystem development, trying to find projects that can move this innovation economy investment forward, either through new submissions and skilling up, or through reviews and resubmissions of good ideas that maybe haven't hit the funding mark just yet. We put this together as a 3-phase approach, and today we're just introducing a number of grant opportunities, introducing this opportunity with SOAR. Second stage, we're going to work with communities to develop and review concept proposals, because a concept paper can be a really powerful tool for helping to engage funders as well as potential stakeholders in your investment. Selling your project often requires a brief executive summary of what the opportunity is. And so a concept paper is something that can provide that executive level summary for outreach and engagement. But it's also something that we can take a look at, and we will take a look at, and try to do some matchmaking to help identify potential funders. Perhaps you already know and just need some advice or guidance or help on refining your approach to those funders, understanding what it is that they value, how to write effectively for them. Perhaps you don't know who to go to look for funding. And I will say, it's not like there's a grant for everything. You know, some things are not priorities in the grant sphere. But where possible, we want to get a better understanding of the projects that are out there that people are interested in funding, and then provide matchmaking and guidance in the context of identifying potential funders. And then we're going to move on to full proposal support for a number of those concepts, the stronger of them, the ones that seem to fit the priorities of the project of getting new applicants, more diverse applicants into the grant sphere. So we're going to have some opportunity toward the end of this calendar year to provide full proposal support for a number of communities to help build the strongest and most competitive proposal possible. So that's the three phases of our partnership with SOAR. We're of course in this introductory phase right now. And so let's talk about grants. All right, let's talk about, like I said earlier, we've got grants for broadband because of the foundational nature of this particular infrastructure. And I want to start out with another quick video. This one is a project that's really near and dear to me because I was present at creation with it. Our community leadership in Marion County, Alabama, at the electric cooperative recognized the need and created an investment platform called Tom Bigby Communications, and they created a program called Freedom Fiber with the goal of serving every household in Marion County, Alabama. And now they've extended over the majority of, I think, 3 or 4 counties at this point.
Some good news for rural Alabama. Households across Marion County now have access to high-speed internet. The first broadband hookup was installed today by Tom Bigby Communications. The company provides rural households with access to their Freedom Fiber internet service. For residents of rural areas, high-speed internet is a game changer. Alabama Congressman Robert Adderholt saying it was important to provide rural areas with the same opportunities as larger cities.
We had an opportunity to try to put some federal dollars in trying to expand broadband across the country. You know, the larger cities were getting broadband. You had broadband in your larger cities, not only in this country, but even in some parts of the state. But rural Alabama and other rural states were not getting the same treatment.
Tom Bigby Communications plans to continue to expand their Freedom Fiber service to more rural areas across Northwest Alabama. To see the current list of service areas, go to join.freedomfiber.com. Some good news.
Yeah, so Tom Bigby Communications, a subsidiary of the local electric cooperative, invested in this fiber network. And their tagline is "Speed so fast the big cities are jealous," and I love it. But the way that they did it was with an initial investment of $8 million of their own bonded capital in the first investment. About halfway through the deployment of that, they went ahead and sped up the next $6 million. So about $14.5 million total of their own bonded debt, their own bond issue, to initially build out the system. But then they were able to follow that up with $1.6 million from USDA's Community Connect grant in 2018, 1.1 from the Appalachian Regional Commission in 2019. And then as a result of those two very successful projects, they were able to enter the game in a big way with the USDA Reconnect grant 2020 that was close to $15 million. So by making the commitment at the level of the cooperative district board to creating a new subsidiary and backing that bond issue and investing in rural broadband, they were able to move the ball forward in a significant way that creates, again, speed so fast, the big cities are jealous. And so just a few tips on broadband basics, how to get started with broadband. SOAR and Rural Innovation Strategies, which is a partner organization for CORI, put together a broadband planning and grant guide that is excellent resource for broadband activities. It's on SOAR's website. Definitely encourage folks to take a look at that. But it all starts with identifying the needs and the providers in the existing service area and understanding what is feasible. And one of the tools that we recommend for accomplishing that is to start a local fiber board that has all of the stakeholders involved, because that's a place for people to gather and convene and exchange ideas about what is and is not possible, and to build the trust that's necessary to have open and transparent conversations about what people are and are not willing to commit from their resources. When you've got that partnership built, right, you got to figure out who's going to own and operate the network. Because until you actually have the right partners on board and you've identified a service area, a service provider, and the financing structure, you're still in the planning phase. You don't really have a grant per se. You're not grant writing at that until you've achieved those things. Grants and the grant opportunities for financing can help structure that planning process for sure, but you're not really writing the grant until you know who the major partners are, where the service is going to be, and how it's going to be paid for. So there's a planning phase that's necessary to eventually establish a grant writing process that can take the results of those plans, the who, what, when, where, and translate it into the language that the grantor needs to see in a competitive proposal in order to invest in a project. And then the last thing really is identifying the grant opportunities and using that to help further frame and guide the planning process in order to develop a project that can transition from planning into the work of writing the proposal, of grant writing that is necessary to present a competitive application. And one of the things that we always say is that, you got to define all this stuff based on data and not on desire, because everyone wants the service, but not everyone can provide the service affordably, and not everyone can provide the service in certain areas. And some competitors are not going to play ball, and so the dynamics of reality and data sometimes trump our strong desire to provide this universal technology and this incredible service as broadly as we'd like to. But by working through partnerships and developing feasible plans and strong relationships, you can find communities can find the opportunities and the resources to expand service, to provide this vital resource to local households. So there's a number of programs that can work in this regard. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. We chose these based on their prevalence in the sort of the grant space nowadays, how much funding is available, what the deadlines are likely to be, and so forth. We'll talk about USDA Reconnect programs, some USDA's Reconnect program and the grants that are available in there, ARC and NTIA, which is National Telecommunication Information Administration from the Department of Commerce. This is the boring part where I'm going to try to keep the energy up, not trying to read you all the slides, because the information here is absolutely available. The slides will be available, and also all this is jam-packed on the internet. So USDA's Reconnect program actually it's like 4 programs in one. It's a lot of different rules and regulations, but the major the gist of it is that they can fund grants, grant loan combinations, and loans. The competition for grants is different than the competition for loans. In fact, if you're willing to borrow money from them, they'll virtually give it away. As long as you are technically and financially sound, you can borrow money through this program up to $50 million. They have only $150 million available currently, but the 100% loan program, that last bullet point, is actually, we'll say it's not competitive, but it is much, much less competitive than the grant programs, as you can imagine, because the grant programs don't have to be paid back. They have two grant programs that they a little deceptively title 100% grant programs. The first of them has up to $25 million available. There is some flex in that value. You can go up to $35 million if you're in this frontier area. It's a little deceptively labeled because it does actually require a 25% matching share. So you do have to match their 100% grant program with 25% local share. So it's a little confusing, but they have $150 million available. There is a carve out in that if the service area has 90% or fewer households sufficiently served, speeds fast enough, then they can go up to 100% federal share. There's no matching requirement if less than 90% of the service area has the speeds that they're looking for, which are currently 100 over 20 megabit speeds. They only have $150 million available. I know it sounds like a lot, but there's a lot more demand out there. And then the second bullet point there is for Alaska Native corporations, tribal governments, and colonias, but in particular here, not look more closely at the persistent poverty areas and the socially vulnerable communities, and the USDA has a map of those locations to help target those areas. But there's $25 million available. Again, it can flex up to $35 million if it's a remote area. And in this case, it is 100% federal. There's no matching share required if you're serving a certain concentration of these areas. So a certain number of households in land area meet these Alaska Native tribal government, persistent poverty, socially vulnerable criteria, and there's no matching share available. And they've actually put more money in this area, $350 million, than they have in the past. There is also a 50-50 loan and grant program where you can request up to $25 million of loan money and concurrently up to $25 million of grant money. So a $50 million total project, up to $50 million total project split between loan and grant. You don't have to ask for the full amount, but any amount that you do ask for up to that cap has to be split 50-50. So 50% loan, 50% grant. There's $300 million in that. And the interest rate is based at whatever the treasury rate is, and the terms of that repayment. The terms of repayment on that loan are based on the useful life of the infrastructure, plus a 3-year sort of grace period where you can get established. So you use the first 3 years to actually build the infrastructure out. Same terms as are listed there for the 50-50 loan grant portion apply to the 100% loan portion. So if you take a loan from USDA, you've got the useful life of the infrastructure that you're building, plus an additional 3 years to pay that back. Across all of those programs, you can see a list of eligible applications here that include the common applicants, corporations, LLCs. Those are your usual ISP providers. Cooperatives are eligible, state and local governments and Native American tribes. Cooperatives, state and local governments, and Native American tribes receive extra points in the application process, so they get a little bit of an advantage over private sector corporations. As applicants, they get a few extra points. To be eligible, a proposal has to be constructing fiber in an area that has less than 100 over 20 internet speeds, 100 megabytes over 20 megabytes internet speeds, but they have to build to a standard. They have to propose to construct a network that is capable of 100 over 100 simultaneous speeds. You can also use these funds to improve or to acquire existing facilities. The acquisition part is restricted to facilities that are currently out there that aren't providing. You can buy facilities from service providers that are not providing fast enough speeds and upgrade those as part of this program. It's restricted to rural locations, which USDA has a bunch of different definitions. In this case, it's the standard of communities less than 20,000 or places that are not adjacent to a city of at least 50,000. So it's got that urban metro mix in there. To be eligible, at least half the households in the service area must lack sufficient access to broadband of 100 over 20 speeds. Got a 5-year build out. You got to provide your financials, and you got to show that it's technically and financially feasible. The portal for this, the application guidelines are out there right now, but the portal for receiving applications opens in September, just a few days from now, and will close in early November. The scoring for that is based on the things you see here, the things you'd expect: rurality, current level of service, whether you're a state, local, tribal government, and so forth. It's a complicated program because it's got so many different funding categories, and because the service area eligibility, mapping, all that goes into determining where you're going to work and how you're going to spend the funds is based on existing service and the feasibility of the program financially, as well as the technical feasibility of the service to actually meet the speed requirements. A lot of complications in that, but definitely lots of money in it too. Every year, most folks here are probably familiar with the Appalachian Regional Commission. Every year, ARC provides funding for several hundred investments in things like business development, education, infrastructure, including broadband infrastructure and other community development activities. They do this through their area development funds, through power, and through a couple of other targeted initiatives. But for broadband purposes, area development funds are out there and available based on state planning, based on the ARC national plan. Each state receives an allocation of funds based on the formula. Probably something that everyone's here is pretty familiar with. And then in addition to the area development funds, Congress has funded quite a lot in the power program over the last several years, which is targeted to coal impacted communities. In this fiscal year, they put $65 million into it, and there's a reserve for up to 21.6, or a third of it, to go to broadband. It's an 80-20 matching program based on distress. The annual funding cycle for power closed in April, but we do expect that it's going to open back up again next year. So it's a big opportunity. I did not mention, should have area development funds. Kentucky's pre-applications for those program funds are due October 28th. And that's probably one that, again, most people are probably pretty familiar with ARC, especially the area development funds and the state administered program. But it's an important one. It doesn't invest just in broadband, but it can be worked into a plan or a strategy for economic development, for community development, using those funds. NTIA has this new program out, which is for middle mile grant infrastructure. Middle mile infrastructure is that fiber line that closes a gap between a backbone, big pipe, and the last mile service, which actually goes to takes the service from the middle mile portion to the premise, to the household, to the business. So middle mile connects the backbone to the last mile service, but it does not connect to an end user location. This is a brand new program this year. It's got a September 30 deadline, so very difficult to get an application in, but we do think it's going to be available next year for middle mile service. They gave close to $1 billion this year for middle mile. It does, however, require a 30% matching share. And then this is one to watch. Nationally, Congress allocated $42.5 billion for broadband projects. It's going to be split among states by the formula based on, a certain set allocation, a certain divided up evenly portion, plus a certain portion for a formula based on level of underservice and so forth. Real complicated thing, because that's how Congress does business. But there's a lot of money coming to each and every state and territory in the U.S. based on this program to provide service to areas that are unserved, which they define as less than 25/3 service, or underserved, which they define as less than 100/20. These funds, the reason to watch them is because they're going to be state administered. Every state is currently applying for a pool of planning funds to figure out where they're going to invest, and a pool of implementation funds to figure out how they're going to invest. The implementation funds will come up with a state administered process based on a 5-year action plan that will be supposed to be informed by local and regional collaboration. States will have to figure out how to meet the federal matching requirement of 25%. So they'll figure out how to pass that through to local applicants, or whether they're going to, share that cost with local applicants. The initial planning fund applications were submitted in the middle of this month, so 15th of August, 22. over the next 6 to 8 months, some of the program rules and regulations should be coming out about how that program, a lot of the planning is going to have to go in, a lot of the planning for how the funds are going to be spent will take place in the next several months. Those planning efforts will then lead to an application for funds that is designed and administered by the state of Kentucky, and each of the other 49 states and territories will have their own. But the design of that program is really in the hands of the state. The feds will approve it, but ultimately it will be based on the application process, the matching share requirements, and so forth that are designed and administered at the state level. So keep an eye out for opportunities to engage in that if you're interested in broadband expansion. Quick check on, we don't have a Q&A backlog, so I'm going to push forward here. Talk a little bit more. This is really, I do broadband projects because they're necessary infrastructure. They're about like roads, water, and sewer in the old days of economic development. They're not the flashiest of projects, and frankly, they're not the most fun, but they're absolutely necessary to get things done. The ones I love, though, the ones I'm really passionate about, are ecosystem development and economic development grants. That's my bread and butter. It's part of my DNA, if you will, as someone who has come from a regional planning background and transitioned through higher education, workforce development, and into working with communities on this type of activity. So just some of the, the high level basics, like we said before about broadband, there's some basic approach to grant planning and funding for digital ecosystems and digital economic development. And probably the most important thing here is to start and stay focused on the business community. What's missing? What are people saying? How is the business community being affected by the mix of opportunities or the lack of opportunities at the local level? Because for ecosystem to be successful, ecosystem building to be successful, it has to center and focus on the needs of the business community and the entrepreneurs. What are the startups lacking? What do they have access to? What do we do well? What can we do better? And then all of the other partners, workforce education, economic developers, a diverse group of stakeholders, can focus their efforts through the ecosystem building and the planning and development activities to serve the business community, because they're not necessarily focused exclusively on entrepreneurs and tech-based startups, but by having an initiative that is focused exclusively on entrepreneurs and tech-based startups, it can help these other community assets to take a portion of their capacity and more effectively apply it to that realm of economic development, to digital tech as a realm of economic development. So first, understanding the entrepreneur, the startup community, and then understanding how the varied and often distracted mandates of workforce education, local government, and so forth can be directed towards supporting that is critical. And then, of course, designing projects as a result of that, using the partnership and the investment resources across these stakeholder groups to design projects that meet those business and startup community needs while matching the fit, if you will, with the funding opportunity. We talk about this a lot in grant writing. You have to identify grants that have the best fit. And that means that your project accomplishes what the funder wants to accomplish. They're very unlikely to adapt their rules, which are set by law and regulation very often, to your project. Your project has to fit their objectives. And so it can take some mental agility to make that happen and to figure out how to present it in a way that meets the funder's requirements and the oversight that's necessary for most grant programs. And here again, so that you're not just listening to me drone on, I'll give you an example from the town of Waterville, Maine, which is a rural community in Maine, that has started on this using a number of the grant programs that we're going to talk about here in just a second.
Waterville has so many possibilities. There has been so much happening over the last few years in terms of a very focused investment in the downtown area with Colby College here, and then the supporting players of folks like Thomas and Kennebec Valley Community College and the hospitals has created this unique opportunity that all things seem possible.
Nestled along a scenic river in Maine, Waterville is the classic New England town. Not surprising, though. Over the past 2 decades, the mill and manufacturing industry that once was a source of jobs in Waterville is in demise. But after a 20% population decline and a loss of over 1,000 jobs throughout rural Maine, a shift is happening. Today, tech firms are leading a cultural, economic, and digital comeback with over 100 new jobs and nearly 6% population growth in just 8 years.
BRICS was launched in 2018 in so many ways as an offshoot of strategic initiatives with regards to recruiting tech and innovation into the downtown. The entrepreneur and owner of BRICS Co-working and Innovation Space, RJ, we had been working closely on some other projects. We had both wanted to see co-working or an innovation space in Waterville. It just didn't exist.
I think one of the big things was there was stuff already happening in town, obviously. There's Colby College that does some great things. There's Thomas College, some other colleges. There's Garvin, the Central Maine Growth Council. But they're kind of their own silos, right? They all kind of operate on their own. And what we really wanted the space to be was that integration point, kind of bringing everybody together, these different demographics, these different companies. And that's where it really started.
It was very much a proof of concept, and then us programming and layering in entrepreneurial activities to the point where BRICS Co-working and Innovation Space really hitting its stride, hitting its profitability in under that 3-year mark, and even today where it is today, outgrowing its space and just attracting entrepreneurs, startups, innovators from really all over the world, and now contributing to what we're building, which is a global ecosystem of startup communities where investors and entrepreneurs can kind of live, can create, and hopefully change the way we live.
In 2020, 3 grants from the EDA were awarded for Maine's small business innovation, totaling over $1.4 million. While innovation comes from those who dream it, those dreams become reality with incredible funding and investments that breathe life into rural communities like Waterville.
When I came to Colby, I knew that I really wanted to explore something outside the classroom. And so when it came to just pursuing my own things and trying to make my own things and learn about the world of building things genuinely, I learned how difficult and vulnerable that process is. To work on something on your own from 0 to 1, to want to create something of your own, to share it to the entire world is a very scary process. So after talking to a lot of other college students who shared the problem that I had, the Cubby was born because of this issue. And so we decided to create a home, a marketplace, where we can empower these same college student creatives. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and growing up and going to school there, I've learned that it's a very oversaturated and honestly a very busy and noisy town. And this background noise I talk about is one that might not seem important at first, but it really takes you away from what's really important. And a place like Colby, a place like Waterville, they really focus on the growth and the economic development and really furthering that mission one step at a time. So BRICS and RJ were one of the first ones to reach out to me to give me that very integral support I wanted and needed, honestly, in the very beginning of my journey. Everyone is trying to further that mission, and everyone's on the same page. And so someone like myself, as a young entrepreneur, I've been able to receive so much more exposure from that and receive so much more support, levels of support that I would not have received in a larger or more busy or noisy city.
The building that we're in was a factory, right? They made shirts here. And it was one of many factories in Waterville along, the Kennebec River. And most of those are gone now. They slowly went away, and the same is true in town and city across the state and really across the country. So how do those jobs get replaced? I don't think that a lot of communities are really there yet in figuring out how to replace those kinds of jobs. You know, that's part of what we need to do. Retrain or train people so that they can find something new. I mean, it's anecdotal, but it could potentially be a model for places like this. And that's part of what we want to do with the work that we're doing, is not just to bring more vibrancy and prosperity to this city, but to show people across the country that this can be done in small communities. And it takes partnership, it takes commitment, but it's absolutely possible, and we're showing that it's possible.
How do you create jobs in rural places? Turn small businesses into large businesses. With generous funding and a local commitment to revitalize towns that once thrived in traditional industries, places like Waterville, Maine will attract talented entrepreneurs and become an innovative, tech-based economy and a thriving, vibrant community once more.
So Waterville is an incredible success story. It's one of many. I think a couple of key things come through very clearly in this case study, this example. First, no community has solved for the economic impacts that we've witnessed. But those that are solving and being successful are taking innovative and incremental approaches. They're using the evidence of their own lived experience and the connections that they have to people in their community, and can build to across communities to create new opportunities and to experiment in ways that they haven't done before. And then as a follow-up, a corollary, something that I think is just crucially important to be communicated as part of this work, is that there's no place, there's no race, gender, religion, sex, complexion, or y'all, even accent, that can't embrace this as a potential for economic development. We have for far too long spun a yarn, told a tale about rural America that was weak and declining, instead of one that was innovative and creative and growing. And as rural people, as Appalachian people, we pride ourselves on our resiliency. We pride ourselves on our toughness, on our stubbornness at times, and our capacity to adapt to change and to endure toughly and prosperously to make ends meet. And I think that same mentality across the rural innovation network, across rural America, is what's necessary to invest in entrepreneurship. And so I hope that examples like this and work that we're doing with SOAR and across other communities become an inspiration to try to take advantage of these opportunities that are out there. So we're going to talk about a few of these economic development grants. Some of them, again, are usual suspects. Appalachian Regional Commission, very familiar to most folks in Eastern Kentucky, I'm sure. What might be new is thinking about how they can apply to ecosystem building and digital technology-based economic development. In addition to that, we'll talk about a couple of programs from the Economic Development Administration and a couple from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Again, the alphabet soup's out there. The federal programs are out there. The rules and regulations are out there on the internet. They're on these slides. There are links to websites. All the rules and everything are available. The key thing here is how these programs are being used to adapt to the challenges of rural America through the lens of digital technology-based economic development and support for new tech-based startups. First one we'll talk about is EDA Build to Scale program. Build to Scale is really EDA's flagship program for investing in tech-based economies. EDA, manages a whole portfolio of grants that focus on initiatives that support high quality job growth in technology related fields. So what Build to Scale is intended to do is invest in community ecosystem building and support for businesses, business support services that foster new technologies that can then be used or leveraged in a way that generates new jobs, new economic activity, and new prosperity in local communities. Build to Scale has two what they call challenges, and each of these challenges has two funding levels. The first challenge is the venture challenge, which makes grants to organizations that provide business support services that are intended to support scalable technology businesses that are disruptive and offer an opportunity to grow new technologies and new markets that create new value through technology and automation. This program actually closed in June, but it has been authorized annually. It does have a 1-to-1 matching share requirement. As I mentioned before, it does have two funding levels. The first or lower funding level is the build level, where they can invest up to $750,000 of federal money. Of course, that has to be matched by up to $750,000 of local match, can be cash or in kind. And then the scale level is intended to fund communities that have a track record or a history of success as they build on that track record or history of success to enter new markets, to offer new services, to increase the geographic scale or scope of the ongoing activities. And the range on the scale program is higher. It's from a minimum of $750,000 up to a maximum of $2 million of federal funds. Again, this is based on the most recent notice funding opportunity or competition. These levels can and do change occasionally from year to year. The matching share has been consistent. The scale level actually increased a little bit from $1.5 million at the top end to $2 million last year. And there's some, rules and regulations on who can and cannot provide match. Again, this EDA's flagship program. It's one of the larger. It is one of the larger ones that we work with. It's one of the grants that was made to a place like Waterville. They're probably the bulwark of the $18.5 million of funds that CORI has been able to help communities secure have come through the venture challenge at the build level with communities that have some dabbling in tech-based economic development, but they're really just getting started. The second challenge in the Build to Scale program is called the Capital Challenge, which provides operational support for organizations that are trying to start capital investment funds. So they're trying to recruit angel investors, trying to recruit investors to set up a capital investment fund to provide a source of capital in a community that has the potential to generate new tech startups. Now, all the Build to Scale funding has the restriction on it that can't be invested directly in the business. So in this case, the Capital Challenge is there to provide support for the organization starting up to be able to recruit investment from other organizations that can then be the source of capital that's invested in new startups and new companies to accelerate their growth. Federal funds, and neither of these programs can use federal funds to invest directly in businesses. The Capital Challenge also has a 1-to-1 matching share. It has two funding levels. The form level provides up to $300,000 in federal funds, so around $600,000 total project cost. For investment funds that have some experience, if they want to grow their service area, increase the type of activities, the target markets that they have, and so forth, the deploy level of funding can be used to provide up to $750,000 of federal funds. Again, 1-to-1 match required in order to grow or expand. Again, it's for operational programmatic costs and not to provide direct investments in companies, but it can be very useful for those that are trying to establish or start up a new capital investment fund. In fact, the Center on Rural Innovation has the CORI Investment Fund, which was started several years ago with the help of a successful Capital Challenge application. Like everything in the grant world, there's a list of eligible entities that can apply. One of the things that is important for EDA purposes, most EDA grants, is this eligibility requirement related to nonprofits. Nonprofits have to demonstrate that they're working in conjunction with a state or local government or a political subdivision of the state. So in other words, an entity that is not a state, Indian tribe, city, or other political jurisdiction, including higher education institutions, like a nonprofit, for example, has to demonstrate that they have the support of a local government, state government, or other governmental entity to back up and support their application. So they can't apply independently. I mean, they can be the lead applicant, or they can apply as the applicant, but they have to have a letter of support from a governmental entity. Excuse me. And these activities can really transform local communities. We saw the Central Maine Growth Council video on the brick project in Waterville, Maine, and I think Garvin Donegan was featured in that. You can see his quote there. But you can see the quotes from those that have been involved in this, and the way that these investments have been transformative to the people who have been able to receive them. With Southwest Wisconsin, Red Wing, Minnesota, and then a couple of other examples. We had a Build a Scale winner in Traverse City, Michigan, through 20 Fathoms Innovation Hub to work on a collaborative workspace, create new opportunities for mentorship, and then run a sort of a concierge service for helping new startups to navigate the startup business environment. It's something that a lot of startups struggle with, is finding the right resources at the right time to support the business. And so one of the investments that 20 Fathoms is making is in this concierge service, sort of a community navigator or business navigator program that helps people to find the right resources, and then helps provide 12 weeks of intensive support through an accelerator program, in this case focused on health technology. Cape Girardeau is a second over in Missouri. The organization is actually the Marquette Tech District Foundation, and they run a co-working space, and sort of the mothership, if you will, of the Cape Girardeau Innovation Hub is called Codify. And the investment here is all about expanding their startup hub, providing additional support services to rural communities in and around Cape Girardeau, with special events, and providing access to tech talent to early stage entrepreneurs, and helping find a pathway to employment for computer programmers. So this investment, a series of investments actually have been transformative in Cape Girardeau since about 2014, when Codify was initially founded. And it's been able to, successfully redevelop and remake the local downtown district in a way that I think would not have been possible if they had not had an entity that was invested in supporting tech startups. And since they've been founded, they've actually supported more than 50 new startups, created more than 180 jobs, and raised more than $20 million in capital equity. And the Build to Scale program is a big part of helping them achieve their mission. Similar to Build to Scale, ADA has a program that's devoted to workforce development and to apprenticeship type training. It's called the STEM Talent Challenge. The program regs for STEM talent, the notice funding opportunity, the rules, the application is not out yet for FY22, but it does look like they're going to get some additional funding for the STEM Talent Challenge this year. And this is another one to watch because it's a workforce development program. Whereas Build to Scale seeks to invest in business support services, STEM Talent Challenge invests in workforce development through work-based learning models. So it looks to increase and improve the use of work-based learning models as a way of teaching tech talent to improve the innovation economy. It's not an investment in health care, education, advanced manufacturing per se, but it is an investment in the workforce, in the development of workforce that is tied to the innovation economy. So helping to improve the experiences and the training opportunities for those that will then go on to match up with and meet demand for innovation economy, tech sector, job creation in the regional economy. So there's an element of defining the regional economy, defining what the innovation economy looks like in the regional economy, defining what the work-based learning opportunities are, the partnership opportunities, and so forth that go into developing a successful STEM Talent Challenge application. And it can be a very powerful tool for providing a catalyst for developing these new programs and pathways that can then fuel the workforce development activities inside of the innovation economy locally. And then lastly, among the EDA programs, EDA's traditional programs, which are public works and economic adjustment assistance, these projects typically provide funding for planning, infrastructure, and technical assistance projects, but they can be used for entrepreneurship and for infrastructure, including broadband. EDA's major metrics are job creation and private investment. And their investment priorities are directed toward their priority for investment or distressed local communities. So the minimum criteria to be eligible for EDA funding is that the location is 80% or less of the national per capita income. Funds can be used for things like feasibility studies for entrepreneurship, construction projects related to entrepreneurship, workforce training centers. Again, all these things have to be tied to outcome metrics that are related to jobs and private investment. The slam dunk opportunity with EDA is, of course, the new industry that's coming in that's going to locate and bring a certain number, a known and certain number of jobs with it, and requires a certain a certain public investment like water, sewer, roads. But there are ways to approach the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program for planning and technical assistance and construction related to digital technology and entrepreneurship. And so EDA is moving more toward funding those type of activities, whereas in the past, they've been somewhat of a more traditional recruitment and retention support type program. But they're seeing some incredible movement, some great movement in supporting entrepreneurship and tech-based economic development out of EDA within their more stable traditional programs. I mentioned the distress criteria of a 50% matching share at this level of per capita income. Communities might also qualify under a category of special need, such as the pandemic impacts or a natural disaster, or a sudden and severe economic shock, like a base major business closing or a base closure if you're in a military community. Projects funded under this category of EDA funding have to be included in a comprehensive economic development strategy, or a CEDS. So there's a CEDS compliance requirement. So understanding who the economic development district is that's producing this regional planning document is really important, and coordinating with them to ensure that the activities that are proposed are compliant with or included in the CEDS. In FY22, EDA received $37.5 million for these regular program operations. And for the first time ever, under this category of funding, they received an additional, it's not the first time they received additional funds. It's the first time that they received additional funds for assisting coal communities that the amount was greater than the regular program funds. So they received $37.5 million this year for the regular program, but $41.5 million for assistance to coal communities. So there's a lot of opportunity out there to approach EDA and the regular programs for funding to help support digital tech-based economic development. Jumping over to U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA has a new program. It's sort of a pilot still. The funding level is listed at $10 million, but I think their history has been to fund about $2 to $3 million a year. So not a whole lot of applicants are being funded, especially when you look at the award amount, which is $500,000 to $2 million. So it's really competitive. It's still a pretty small program, but we're getting the word out about it because the more interest and impact that RISE can have, the Rural Innovation Stronger Economy program can have, the more likely we are to be able to see some more funding allocated to it. But anyway, the RISE program is intended to invest in business development hubs in regional communities. So it's to augment or create new high-wage jobs and to help form new businesses that support a local industry cluster. So what you have to do with the RISE program is actually identify the industry cluster that you wish to invest in, demonstrate that the cluster has some opportunity in the local region, and then describe holistically how RISE program funds can be used to support it. Unlike a lot of other programs, RISE, although it's a small funding level right now, RISE has this focus on creating a jobs accelerator partnership, which is very holistic. It includes workforce development, includes infrastructure development, includes business support services. It's a very flexible and adaptive pool of funds that are invested in these jobs accelerator programs inside of these industry clusters. And one of those industry clusters can be IT and digital technology jobs. The application deadline for this passed in April. We are very hopeful that we'll receive funding again for next year in FY23. We're hopeful that the funding amount will increase so that the level of competition kind of goes down and the number of applications that can be funded go up. But it's another one to watch as it opens back up. It's a great opportunity though, for a holistic investment in a digital tech cluster in a local economy. It's a big one. It's up there like build a scale. It's transformative in its investment. You can build an incubator or a support facility, provide workforce training, train existing workers for new or high skilled, develop a base of skilled workers and so forth. So it's a large number of eligible activities for the RISE program, a diverse array of eligible activities for RISE program. And it's a really, it's a great opportunity. We wish that it had more money. If it was funded at the level of the Build to Scale program, which is currently around $45 million per year, we'd be able to see a lot more impact from it. But the first step is awareness. The next step is people actually applying for and asking and demonstrating, asking for the funds and demonstrating how the funds would be used to impact or benefit their local communities. Another USDA grant program is the Rural Business Development Grant Program. This is an incredible opportunity for rural places to get started in tech-based economic development because the application is not extraordinarily complicated. It's submitted through the state rural development office, and the sweet spot for it is for applications that are in really rural locations that are asking for less than $100,000. So the matrix of points, which is spelled out in the notice of funding opportunity, you get more points the smaller the place is. You get more points the less money you ask for. All right. So the sweet spot is a smaller, more rural location that's asking for a smaller investment to take an incremental step in their economic development journey. And the great thing about this is that, again, it's recommended by the state rural development office. So having a relationship at a more local level is really a huge advantage. Having a part of that decision being made at the level of the state rural development office is a huge advantage because you can get to know those people better. They know you better. The other thing about this program is that it can be a first stepping stone in a chain of stepping stones that show that you have the capability to write, implement, and administer a grant program. It can get you started with some outside funds that's not the most complicated. It's still government, but it's not the most complicated application in the world to write. It's not the most complicated one in the world to administer. Those that have worked with USDA on other programs are probably groaning right now because USDA does have a pretty onerous reputation about their administration. But this particular program is not as challenging as some of their broadband applications or some of their infrastructure grant or loan grant programs can be. Anyway, I would encourage folks that are just getting started to look very closely at the rural business development grants. Those typically take applications around February of each calendar year. And a great way to get started is to have your project idea on the page in a way that you can present to your rural development officials and talk with them about what the right approach might be and how that might fit. RDBG is really flexible. It can provide training and technical assistance, business counseling, market research, and a lot of other things. It can support rural incubators and so forth. The major eligibility requirement for the activities funded under rural business development grants are that it focuses on small businesses, which has a specific definition of, I think, less than 50 employees, and there's certain revenue requirement. But you can use these funds to focus on new tech startups in your community. And then moving on to the old tried and true, tell you about my grandpappy, old reliable, right? That's in a Disney cartoon somewhere. ARC is just an incredible program. And we're so fortunate to have ARC partnerships. In the space of digital tech-based economic development, there are really 4 critical ARC programs. We mentioned area development funds. Those are the state administered funds that come through the state of Kentucky's state application process, move on to be funded. They're ultimately funded through a federal and state partnership, but it starts with the process that's administered at state level. I'm a huge fan, you can tell, of getting things as close to home as possible, because your relationships, your understanding of each other, your understanding of needs, your ability to talk about a project and develop a project is so much stronger. Not necessarily if it's, the virtual world gives us some more opportunities, but if it's at the state level, you have a stronger ability, it seems, to build that relationship. And so ARC area development funds are incredible. They're also a great place to go for sort of the seed investment, the starting out to build a program that demonstrates your capability to do bigger and bigger and bigger and more impactful things along the way, because everybody's got to get started somewhere. Power is targeted toward coal impacted communities. They're getting a lot of money through the infrastructure, and I think the Infrastructure Jobs Act is the official title, but the infrastructure bill that was recently passed is going to put a lot into the power program. ARC received a lot of money for power. And so coming up, it can be an opportunity for both broadband, but also for building business incubators and investing in digital technology ecosystems and so forth. And then the last 2 ARC programs I want to mention, one of them is the Inspire program, which is, again, it's currently closed, but it's an initiative that we think will be funded again next year. Last year, they had $10 million to address substance use disorder, which is a huge issue nationwide. And we know that it impacts rural communities, Appalachian communities, and many communities in Eastern Kentucky at a disproportionate rate for a lot of reasons. And we talked earlier about local issues tied to national, regional scale issues, tied to national scale issues, tied to global issues. Well, that's definitely one of them. So if you have a recovery ecosystem that you're trying to support, and you have a technology project that can be adapted to support the recovery ecosystem, Inspire is an incredible opportunity to take a look at that convergence of need for digital tech-based economic development and for substance use treatment, and to transition from dependent state to independent state, and to help people to grow and become more successful as they transition through the recovery process into the workforce. And then the last one I'll mention is last year, the Workforce Opportunity in Rural Communities, or WORK program, received $32.5 million that was divided up between the Delta Regional Authority and ARC. It's actually it's a Department of Labor administered program, but applicants are eligible if their project is in the ARC region. They're also eligible if it's in the DRA region. And this year, they're also going to add some additional money. It shouldn't take away from the ARC funding, but they're adding some additional funding for the Northern Borders Regional Commission. So the regional commissions nationally will receive some funding through the Workforce Opportunities or WORK program. ARC will receive some of that funding, and ARC communities will be eligible for it. And it's mainly for transitions related to communities that were energy dependent, energy industry dependent. And of course, that includes coal and nuclear power and power plants and so forth. But it's these 2 are incredible workforce development opportunities. That's the bucket that they fit in. It's workforce development. I think I've got Blank slide there. No.
Inspire is really enhancing the recovery to work piece. It's all about people stepping up to the plate and inspiring others to do so. We have to do it together. We're stronger together. We won't be able to just do it as treatment centers. We can't just do it as the economic development entities. Everybody has to come together, you dig? Because one commonality that we have is everybody is being impacted by it right now.
The impact substance abuse has on our community is very large. It was very significant before the pandemic, and after the pandemic even more so. The CDC just released their numbers, and we're over 93,000 overdose deaths for 2020. To me, that's a pandemic within a pandemic. It's very important that we even push harder on this issue, and we feel like one of the key pieces is getting that transportation, housing, and workforce. It's about substance use treatment, it's about workforce development, and it's about employment.
Because a person in recovery, there's different things they need. That goes back to the ecosystem. So with Inspire, we're looking to inspire other stakeholders to join us at the table to be a part of the ecosystem. And we also want to destigmatize.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share here. I got a couple of slides left with some dates and things on them, and we'll share that out. Work and Inspire are incredible programs because they recognize that it takes, y'all know, y'all heard it a million times, it takes a village, it takes an ecosystem, it takes all of the, they write specifically about wraparound services. And that's something that we haven't seen a lot in the past. We're starting to realize that communities don't prosper unless all the institutions that are involved are engaged. All the institutions that exist, that work in silos, that provide transportation, education, economic development, substance abuse, healthcare, unless they're all engaged and clearly understand how their attention, which is the most valuable resource, their time and attention, can be directed with help from others toward a specific outcome. Everybody that does the work that we do wants to help. It's whether we have time to be able to engage with our most valuable resource, which is our time, and how to get that oriented and made effective. The ecosystem building model that we describe is a way for an organization to take ownership of that part of the economic development system that's focused on digital technology, and then to connect to the other institutions that provide all the services that are necessary for a community to thrive, for an economic development project to be successful. Think about Inspire, think about work that's a little different, and even to an extent USDA RISE. What we're seeing is that investments are getting out of their silos more, and they're talking more about how people are connected, not how they are divided. And structurally, the more that we invest as a nation in policies that connect us rather than divide us, the more successful we will be in all of our areas of economic and community life. And so there's a couple of things that I always try to bring to the closing remarks in a presentation like this that I draw on from my planning background, from working in subdivisions, working in zoning, community level planning, comprehensive land. And the first and probably the most important one is build no dead ends. In life or property development, dead ends are the things that separate communities from one another. And so understanding that in the physical space of the street layout, if you hit a cul-de-sac, that's a great place for a few families to live, but it doesn't connect that community to other communities, right? That's a metaphor for community development as well, because none of the relationships that the people we make contact with are dead-end relationships. None of the project activities that we start that may not work out, we may not hit that grant application deadline. None of those are dead ends, though. The effort is not wasted. We never start over again. And that's something that, despite discouragement, the learning process is continuous, and it is beneficial and valuable as we move forward in community development, as we engage in planning and project development and grant writing activities. It leads to the second thing, which is that everything is connected in all walks of life. And that's the fundamental of the ecosystem building approach, is that everything is connected. And then the last thing is that success, cliche, progress moves at the speed of trust. And trust is built incrementally, slowly through engagements with people that do what they say they're going to do over time. The network of institutions and the people in those institutions and organizations that you can build to be successful, whether it's tech-based economic development or growing a nonprofit organization or any walk of life, I think, is based on those small commitments of time and energy that people live up to that eventually build the foundations of trust that are I think they're the basic foundations of all of our communities. And so by engaging in the most valuable investment that we can, which is our time, in planning, grant writing, grant development, and so forth, what we're really doing is we're not chasing money, we're chasing trust. And by building trust, we're building the basic currency that's needed to exchange in a market of progress, right? By building trust, we have the currency that we need to depend on one another to build community and to build economies. And so, after saying all of that, I'll tell you what some of the next steps are. In the next few days, we're going to work with SOAR to release a request for concept papers. And that will have instructions on how to put together a several-page document, 5 or 6 pages, that includes an overall project description, a project summary, high-level budget, things like that can help us to better navigate this alphabet soup that we just shared. So I expect you to remember all that stuff. I got slides to remember. We're going to help you. We're going to provide those slides to help you kind of have some reference material for it. And the internet's full of opportunities. So if there's something else out there that you're aware of, that you think we should be aware of, we want to know about that too. The concept request for proposals will help to structure that thinking. We're going to host a webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks. I think the date on that is somewhere around September 9th, to walk through that request for proposals and the writing process that I would recommend. Everybody's going to have to use the role, but I would recommend to thinking about how to fill out that request for proposals. And then we're going to actually give you some time to put those couple of weeks to put those together and then submit them to us, to SOAR and to CORI, for us to review and look through. Offer some tips and advice on prospecting and matchmaking strategies to help both strengthen and refine the concept if we see any opportunity to, but also to match that concept to funding opportunities that come top of mind as we read through that. And then lastly, as we move forward into the latter months of this calendar year, SOAR is going to work with CORI to look through those concept papers and to structure a proposal support effort that focuses on how to develop the right proposal with the best fit for some of the stronger opportunities that are presented in those concept proposals. And so we would strongly encourage folks that have less experience in writing for this type of effort to attend the concept paper workshop. It's not a requirement. We're not gatekeeping the concepts that we receive and review, or the guidance and matchmaking that we provide by any means. We want to see all ideas. That's really exciting to see the diversity of ideas that can come from an effort like this. But for those that maybe have less experience to respond to something like this, the webinar would be very helpful. And then the value of having some brief overview of the strengths and merits and connections that a proposal might have to a particular funding opportunity will help people to get started. And then we have the resources to provide some more intensive support services for a handful of those. And then we'll see where it goes. We expect that this partnership is going to be enduring. We at the Center on Rural Innovation, we genuinely appreciate the unique position of SOAR as one of our Rural Innovation Network member communities and the geographic region that SOAR serves. And we're looking forward to the opportunity to continue to engage in this partnership and find ways to bring the value this tech revolution to places that are coming to realize that the future is rural and that the future is tech-based, and that there's no geographic or other barrier to the opportunities that this type of activity can provide. You've heard plenty from me. We've got about 10 minutes left at the top of the hour, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you so much. Okay,
Well,
I don't see any. Colby, you want
I
to
think
grill me on
yeah,
anything? Or
no, I think you did a great job, Nathan, and a lot of information. So I think just as we close out here, I think the big things, we will follow up with the slides, folks, the next 24 to 48 hours, and then we'll also follow up with the specific next steps from this initial webinar. So as Nathan mentioned, really the next thing is hopefully working with some folks to submit some concept proposals. Again, as Nathan said, these can be very raw ideas. We don't expect anyone to have it all figured out, especially as we think about helping newcomers to the grant world really kind of get your feet wet for the first time. So, these concept proposals do not have to be, it's okay for them to be raw, right? And our goal is that we can start there, really pinpoint the right program, and then further develop and give you some, again, targeted assistance from folks that have been in the game before, as you kind of continue down the road and make that kind of raw idea and turn it into a finished product. So in our follow-up email, we'll list out that specific information and then the process for submitting a concept proposal and everything like that. But pretty much, I think that's it. I think today was a great start, Nathan. So thanks so much for the content there. Josh, do you have anything else you want to mention or add before we sign off?
No, not really specifically, other than again, we will get the information out, and I would encourage those who attended today that maybe know people within your network and communities that this would have been beneficial for. This is not, you have to attend this to attend the next one. So as we get this information out with the recording, the next steps, and ways to register for the next event, please, by all means, reach out to folks within your networks, your area development districts, folks like that, to get them at the table, because it is a collective effort when you begin to write some of the content proposals. And we look forward to seeing what we get. And more importantly, we look forward to taking those ones that are in a really good situation and really working with you to help you find the right fit for the next step in your project.
Yeah, I just the last thing I'll say, this is 100% free service to any organizations that want to take part in it. This is normally a service that CORI and Rizzy at a discounted rate or a fair rate, but it is something that takes a lot of their time, energy, and resource. And as a result of some funding that SOAR has secured, we're covering all of the costs for organizations. I want folks to make sure that there is a cost that's normally associated with this, but it is free for folks that are able to come through, and there's something that SOAR looks forward to partnering with, because it's going to be some really high quality assistance and help and development that's going to be offered here. So we will get that information out, and we can kind of go from there. Nathan, anything else before we sign off?
I would just say, look us up online. Check out our website. CORI does a lot of research, has a lot of publications, things that might be of interest to the audience that are out there. A number of other videos that talk about the work that we do. And we're just as excited as can be about the opportunity to continue this partnership and to expand the ability to supplement the incredible capacity that we know is out there in the communities that SOAR and each of you serve. And just genuinely thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. We're excited to be working with you on this as well. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your Thursday, and please reach out to us if we can do anything for you.
Thanks, everyone.